So without further delay, let's get to our panel discussion. So we brought to the forum three dynamic thought leaders who will share their stories and insights, which will inform and inspire us as we all think about the role we play in advancing inclusive business. So I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one and ask them to take the stage as I read their name. And if we all sit in the right spots, it'll be a big check mark for we were well trained. First, let me introduce Lee Huang. As president and principal of Econsult Solutions, Lee brings over 20 years' experience in economic development to ESI's public, private, institutional, and not-for-profit clients. Hi, Lee. These consulting engagements represent a wide range of fields, including higher education, economic inclusion, environmental sustainability, and neighborhood economic development, just to name a few. His economic inclusion work has included analyses of the utilization of minority and women-owned businesses in municipal contracts in Philadelphia, examinations of home lending, business lending, and branch location patterns in Philadelphia, D.C., and New York. Prior to joining ESI, Lee was director with Econsult Corporation, and from 1995 to 2005, he managed the Enterprise Center, an entrepreneurial center in West Philadelphia, whom, of course, we're so proud to work with, and hopefully you met them at the poster session as well. Lee currently serves on the boards of Mission Seminary, Philadelphia Health Management Corporation, and Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, and as a member of the Board of Advisors for our own Stuart Weitzman School of Design. Also, from 2018 to 2001, he served as one of the 9 Philadelphia Board of Education members appointed by Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Lee Huang to the stage. Let me now introduce Tiffanie Stanard. Tiffanie is an award-winning entrepreneur. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, executive, corporate advisor, media personality, and producer with over 15 years' experience. Tiffanie is the CEO and founder of Stimulus, a fast-growing, venture-backed software-as-a-service company with a nationwide team. The Stimulus Relationship Intelligence Platform, which we've seen in action, combines data insights, relationship-building tools, and a proprietary score to help companies make the best purchasing decisions and optimize their supplier ecosystems. Throughout her career, Tiffanie has been hired to consult and advise influential global brands, including Microsoft, Salesforce, AT&T, Intuit, and other organizations. She's the recipient, and here we go, she's the recipient of Walker's Legacy Women in Economic Development Award, the Philly Tribune's 10 Under 40 Most Influential African Americans Award. She's been recognized by Forbes on the Next 1,000 Leaders list, and Business Insider's 10 Leaders Transforming Supply Chain list, among many more honors. Tiffanie has been featured by Inc. magazine, where she's offered supply chain insights and advice for small businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tiffanie Stanard. Rounding out our panel is our Penn friend and colleague, Christopher Wailoo. Come on out, Chris. Chris is the Associate Dean for Business Affairs and Chief Financial Officer at the Penn Carey Law School. He joined the law school in 2020 from the Hirshhorn Museum, one of the Smithsonian museums, where he served for 10 years as lead administrator and financial officer. Under his leadership, the Hirshhorn welcomed groundbreaking exhibits and expanded its reputation as one of the finest museums of modern art in the country. Prior to this role, Chris enjoyed a career in both private business as commercial banking, and strategic consulting for American Express and SunTrust, while he also served as a senior consultant on facilities and finance for a public charter school. Chris is a sought-after board member for a variety of nonprofits. He's a graduate of Dartmouth College, and he holds a Master of Arts in International Affairs from George Washington University. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Chris Wailoo. Let's get it again. All right, I'm going to make my way over to my seat. Thank you. All right. And as we get started, please know that we'll be leaving some time for Q&A toward the end, so hold your questions. We'll have people in the aisles with mics, but we'll do that towards the end. So let's get started. I'm going to begin with Tiffanie. So Tiffanie, you as an entrepreneur, I'm going to do my best Guy Raz, how I built this here to start things off. So with you as an entrepreneur, many of us follow you on LinkedIn. You're one of the most, I swear there's 3 of you, because I see you at a lot of the events that we do, but then I see you somewhere on the globe, presenting somewhere or getting some award. But I think it'd be great for all of us to hear about how you've built your company, your brand, and kind of how you've gotten any help along the way, and just how you've built that in a short bit.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So great to be here. This is one of my favorite events, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here. I come almost every year because it's an amazing event to see all of you in one place. So my background is working in corporate America. I started in payroll and then went over to vendor management. I was always the youngest person at the department. So I look young now, imagine what I look like in my early 20s. Really trying to help companies understand their suppliers, their supply chain. So I was kind of thrown in the mix of doing supplier diversity and working alongside different vendors. I started at a small company that was growing. It was trying to figure out, hey, we're working so much with vendors, how do we do this better? And then went over to a major corporation like Sunoco, really helping them across the board. And again, I was the youngest person in the department, and just learning how much they were spending with vendors and how often they were interacting with vendors was not as great as what they were interacting with when it came to like their employees. So I said, hey, what about events? What about different things? And we were able to really just build out a really great program. And at that time, I had my first business already that I was doing part-time in addition to working for this corporation. So I was working with a lot of small businesses, a lot of businesses that look like me, women, people of color. So I said, hey, how do we incorporate more of these businesses into your supply chain? Because they're asking me how to work with you, and you're asking me how to work with them. So I started doing a lot of manual matchmaking. I ended up leaving that position and starting my first business full time because one, I was ready to leave, and two, they was about to start laying off a bunch of people. So I volunteered to be laid off, and it funded my business for the first few years. So I was self-funded. And throughout that time, I worked with from McDonald's to Paramount Pictures to Microsoft, throughout the years, continuing a lot of that same work, and then also doing other kind of services that really pertain to partnerships. And I said, hey, we have so much information, we have so much data, why are we not bringing it together? And I was seeing it across industry, especially in HR. I like to compare HR with supply chain because it's about sourcing and matching the right people to your organization. And I said, hey, how do we bring these two together? Because now I went from a buyer to a vendor and a buyer. So I'm now trying to get into people's supply chain with my company. And the process was terrible. I was like, this is what we're doing to you guys? Like, it was like we're on every single portal. How many people have been on too many portals? Too many portals, right? And then the different corporations have all of these portals, and it's not allowing for you to understand who you're working with, why you're working with them, and that data. So I started to really bring all of that information, and that's what Stimulus came about. It was looking at, I've been on too many portals, they don't help with relationships. One of the speakers said earlier, they don't let, you don't know who you've been working with, you want to re-engage these relationships, how long have you been working with Penn? None of that information was available. So Stimulus is a relationship intelligence platform that combines data insights, relationship building tools, and a proprietary score to really bring the relationship back to building between suppliers and vendors and helping companies use data to make a quicker purchasing decision. We're also allowing for it to be a vendor-friendly platform so vendors can be discovered for business as well.
That's great. That's great. And I should add that we're working with Tiffanie in a certain degree in a different area, but it's one of the tools that I think we're paying a lot of attention to because there's a lot of connecting of dots that that we think might be potential at a certain point. So I think that's great. Thanks, Tiffanie. Lee, as an economist, so we hear a lot. We talk about fueling business growth, and we're very happy about what we've been able to achieve. I think as a collective community in terms of diverse business growth and things like that. But at the same time, we hear about I've heard this term, the urban doom loop of, not as much capacity in buildings and therefore not as much capacity in restaurants and things like that. So then, and that's been hitting certain communities harder than others. So there's that part of it as well. So where are we today? How do we kind of reconcile all that? How are you feeling about where the economy is today?
That's been the question of the moment. Like many of you, I've been following the mayoral campaign. And you have these exceptional leaders that are painting vision for the city. And, I react to that as a business leader, as a resident, as a parent. And you want to know that who's going to lead us next has a vision for the city where all businesses can thrive, where our children are being educated in safe and vibrant public schools. And so that's the question of the moment. Are we going to get there is TBD. COVID certainly threw us for a loop. One of the things that we learned from COVID is just how important what I'll call serendipitous interactions are to an urban fabric. This is true socially, this is true culturally, and this is certainly true of business. Density is a term that economists use, which is just a concentration of people and activity, and that's what cities are. All due respect to suburban locations, which have their place, and rural locations which have their places. But by definition, urban places, which we're in the middle of right now, are characterized by density, by concentrations of people and activities, formally, informally, planned and unplanned, colliding with each other. That's where cultural flourishing happens, that's where business opportunities happen, and we experienced that in Philadelphia until COVID hit, and then everything shut down. And so all of this doom loop that we've seen throughout the history of our city is starting to come back. And so then the question mark, which our mayoral candidates have been addressing, which all of us engaged citizens are trying to determine, is will that density come back? And so having anchors like University of Pennsylvania, bringing together in an expo format businesses and leaders to formally and informally collide with one another. This is part of how the city is going to recover, and I remain bullish that that's going to happen.
Okay. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Chris, you compliment this panel well as a buyer, as maybe not a buyer by profession, but as a representative of a buying entity in the law school. Tell us about we've of course worked with your team. Tell us a little bit about what's working for you in terms of inclusive buying. What's been successful for you, and how have you done that?
Well, I'll start off by saying that really, not because you've invited me, but the partnership with our purchasing colleagues has really been helpful. It has enabled us to really understand the marketplaces that we're targeting, and it's more than just it's West Philadelphia, it's the region, it's minority owned, it's across the board. Understanding the marketplaces, training our staff, and getting data around actionable intelligence, right? So that's been really working. To the extent that we need to locate the goalpost and understand what success is, we weren't going to come up with that by ourselves. So that partnership is really essential. It's helped us to also develop a process. And our process is aimed at the high volume areas that we're purchasing and our internal constituencies. What do I mean by that? Catering, swag, printing. That's what we've been spending on. Construction is something else also, and we've had some conversations about that. We don't really, at the law school, have that much control over the construction portion of it. But those are the high volume areas. And the people that we're targeting are students, faculty, staff, and helping us understand and work through the drivers. For example, students are the most we find the most open to this concept of diverse vendors, especially around catering, diverse vendors. They're not that versed on the procurement process. They could use some help from you. They're not that, so we, working through, that's one of the challenges, but working through it with students. Faculty is, somewhat distracted, so we've got faculty support that really we've targeted around faculty purchases. Interestingly enough, we've got a staff. You'd think we'd be able to really mandate some action from our staff, and yeah, at some level we can push staff into being more diverse in their purchasing. But truthfully, over a long period of time, our staff has really developed some diverse relationships that, many of them don't want to give up. So they're a harder group to engage with in some ways. So that's been working, and the partnership that you've shared about data and information has helped us move the needle there. Some of the challenges, I mentioned some of the challenges already about how you target certain constituencies, but that it's been really helpful.
Yeah, just a couple comments on that. I think construction is an interesting point. We're doing a lot. I feel like in Philadelphia too, we're making a lot of headway in terms of where the opportunities are to do big jobs with diversity suppliers. And I think, with the work we've talked about, Ann Papa George earlier, with the work she and Chris and Caroline in facilities and others are doing, I think we'll see some other big opportunities there to kind of work together. So I think that's going to be one. I want to make a comment about the students' point. I think that's one of the really neat things in working with you. It's one of the really neat things we've seen, because not only is it a matter of being able to find some of that spend that could go to diverse suppliers, I think they get something out of that too. And we want our students to leave the university really as proud Penn citizens. And I think when they're engaged like that, that helps. It's one thing that helps in that experience. So I think that's really important. And I'll share this as well. This is for anybody that's of the Penn buying community. We'll be having opportunity analytics. So you probably recall opportunity analytics by category that we've presented in the past. We'll have those out in June for you to check out before, as you're getting ready for the next fiscal year. So that's great. All right, thanks, Chris. So Tiffanie, you touched on this, and I know that the data work that you do isn't all about diversity, although we kind of hone in on that a lot when we talk to you, and the work you do with Paige and the work you do with the Chamber of Commerce. But tell us a little bit. You get the front line seat to what buyers are doing out there. Mm-hmm. So obviously, if they're a client that's looking at that's a great sign. But do you get any, like, from your front row seat, do you get any kind of view into kind of what the market is saying about diversity, and what would that be?
Yes. We work across the United States, and our goal is to make sure that you are looking at the best suppliers for whatever it is you're purchasing, product or service, and data that will show if it's a diverse company, choose that company. If it's a woman company, choose that company. And so Mark and I had a conversation of how deep I want to go on this and of what I'm seeing across different industries and different companies. So I'll start on the good stuff, and then I'll work my way across the board. So the good things I'm seeing, obviously over the last few years, people have increased their focus on who they're buying from, why they're buying from them, and then of course trying to either buy local or diversify their supply chain, and understanding that people of color and women are across all industries, from software to services to physical products. So we've been seeing that, which has been great, and increasing their titles, and not just looking at DEI, but belong and understanding what that actually means, and then expanding their program, creating a program, or understanding the importance of how you work with and recruit and source diverse suppliers, understanding procurement. Some have created their first procurement teams throughout these last few years, or supplier diversity teams. So thankful to always see that. And then a lot of corporations have created accelerators and different things that allow for you to work better with them, which has been really nice. On the other side, right, I'm also seeing, unfortunately, when it comes to layoffs, the first team that goes is supplier diversity, or chief diversity officers, or sourcing and procurement. So that's hard, because not only is it affecting your suppliers and the supply chain, it goes back into the relationships that the relationship they no longer have. They now got to rebuild those relationships again. And depending on who comes into that company, they may or may not care. They may or may not want to, start with new suppliers. They may want to look at the current suppliers. So that becomes a very difficult time for your outside team, which is your supply chain. I always say your external team are your vendors and your suppliers, because they're helping your employees do what they need to do in their positions, whether it's get a product out or get a service out, or whatever it is they're doing for your organization. So those teams are going first. And then the excitement, the encouragement over the last few years have definitely went down, whether it's in small business, for us, me being in technology, being in a startup, funding and different things of that nature have went down. There's a saying in the startup world, we're over-mentored and underfunded. I say in procurement, we're over-mentored and under-contracted, right? So it's looking at understanding that not every business needs to be mentored. Not to say you don't need a mentor, not to say you don't need advisors, not to say you don't need boards, because I have an advisory board, I have a board of directors, and I have mentors. But not every time you work with a corporation, you need to be mentored or how to work with a corporation. Most people don't start a business just to start a business. Either you have experience in it, you've been doing it for X amount of years, or you're creating a product or service to solve a problem either you've had or others have had. So when you try to put a 40, 50-year-old person into a mentoring program, when they've been doing this for a long period of time, it's actually disrespectful, right? So it's looking at how you work with these suppliers and understanding, yes, you may be changing your payment terms for this supplier because maybe they can't wait 45 days or 90 days to get paid, but it's not because of them, it's because they can't get a bank loan, right? Or they can't get an investment. But us also understanding all small businesses can't wait 75 days or 90 days, right? So it's understanding the dynamics that don't displace people of color in those categories. It's hard to get, to wait for payments, and it's definitely hard to work with a big corporation no matter the size. And then also looking at all businesses start small, regardless of your color, regardless of who's leading it. And you become large when you get the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth contract. So it's really just going a little bit deeper and not categorizing people of color with things that everyone experiences, but we just have to look at why they're experiencing it. So as I work across industries, as I work with different people, it's us giving them the data to understand that and making sure that they understand that when they're looking at their programs and they're looking at how they're working with suppliers, make sure you ask the supplier before you call it a world-class supplier diversity program. Because I can promise you most suppliers don't feel the same way.
Yeah. Chris, go ahead.
Can I just pick up on a thought you just had? The notion of the other side of the coin of the procurement people being the first out the door during downturn. One thing that's true, the supply chain is not going anywhere, right? Understanding how the basic concept of procurement and purchasing works across the board is something that you can sell as a business understanding opportunity. I mean, before I was at the University of Pennsylvania, I was at Smithsonian. And operationally, procurement is pretty much the same. And understanding the structure and understanding the rules and the rule basis is something that I think, and you're an example of this, right? You left it and now you're teaching others. So I think selling that as a skill set for a young professional is a really great idea.
It definitely would be, because before I even understood the terms of procurement, I'm like, oh, it just means buying stuff. Got it, okay. And it only becomes the word procurement when they become a large company, because when you're small and before you actually hire procurement professionals, it's just buying stuff, it's spending. But then when you get older, you start procuring it, you start looking at how you're spending, and then you realize you can't just spend with your friends. You gotta do RFPs and RFQs and RFIs and all of that. So I definitely try to work with younger people, because they are asking me like, oh, what is this? Like supply chain in general is such a big word. I'm like, you want to work with this big company? You want to sell? That's what that is, right? And it's really simplifying the terminology of just you're working with them and they're buying what you're offering. So,
And going back to that point about the kind of that threat, Chris, you mentioned on procurement, on this area of DEI, I find that really troubling today. So I don't know if anybody saw the news on the Chick-fil-A had just put a DEI person in place, a senior DEI person, and they got a Twitter storm from certain people saying, why did you do this? I'll never go to Chick-fil-A, whatever. And Vince and I were fortunate enough, we chaired the NAEP's DEI committee, and there were some really sad stories about what's happening to DEI in certain states that have decided that this isn't going to be a part of what we fund. And it's a shame that, I find it a shame that it's not about addressing what might be flawed, and there might be certain flaws with how they manage their DEI programs, but they're just tearing it down and mocking DEI programs with new initials and things like that. And that's troubling. And my initial reaction is, well, good for us. We're here in Pennsylvania. We have a great diversity, we have a great diversity program, great diversity community, not only with diverse suppliers, but with Drexel's and all the others that are here in Philadelphia that take it seriously. But then, so we kind of almost look at that, I look at it a little bit like an advantage, like here we are realizing the importance. But I also think it's a shame, because it builds a lot of rhetoric that first of all, there's great people that we know in that state that are losing jobs, and they're losing effectiveness, and then that affects those small businesses, diverse businesses. So the whole thing is just a shame, and I hope we can turn that momentum around, because you're right, 2020, there was so much great momentum, but I guess with great momentum comes backlash. So I think it's, it's upon people like this community to make sure we get that momentum back somehow, or keep that momentum and maybe grow it. So,
Right.
All right, that's Lee. All right, we talked about the urban doom loop, but in other discussions that we've been in other forums, there's the Inflation Recovery Act. There's other state and municipal programs that are being put in place to help cities recover, to help areas recover. We're hearing about different cities that have kind of branded transformations and things like that. We've got the new presumptive mayor-elect coming. What do you see? The other thing I love is we have this burgeoning life sciences industry here, particularly in University City, but in Philadelphia, that gives a lot of hope. So looking forward, if you look a few years out, I know you said you're bullish. Can you offer us anything about your kind of vision, what you might see for the city, and what you think could affect where things go?
Yeah, first I'll say that answering the question of how do you get there, it needs to be preceded by asking the question, why do you want to get there? So this comment that you just made about DEI programs being, and the kind of notion of DEI being under assault is an important one. You have to kind of establish that this is worth doing and make a strong case to all of the different stakeholders. Leaders in the institutions, in City Hall, in the communities have to decide that we want to be the sort of city that is growing, and that is growing inclusively. And that may seem obvious, but clearly it is something that needs to be messaged and unpacked and get people on board with that. Having established the answer to the why, then you could get to the how. And city government currently has a lot of good infrastructure, programmatic infrastructure, if you will, for supporting businesses, and in general for advancing the cause of supplier diversity. I know that there are some good folks here from the Office of Economic Opportunity in the city of Philadelphia, which is charged with making sure that city government is itself behaving in a way that supports diverse suppliers. Every year, by city ordinance, the administration is required to report on the distribution of its own spend on goods and services, and what proportion of those goods and services are being procured either at the prime contractor level or the subcontractor level with certified minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, et cetera, and makes that report publicly available. So it is saying that we as a buyer, city government, as a major procurer in the city economy, we, city government, want to take this seriously. What matters, we measure, so we're measuring it, and therefore this matters. I will tell you, though, that the procurement part of city government is, I don't know, maybe $1 billion, $2 billion out of the $5 billion budget. The rest of it is, of course, payroll, which is, of course, a lot of money. But the city of Philadelphia economy is, I don't know, 80, 90, $100 billion. And so to your point, Tiffanie, you were saying earlier, the thing that's going to be most helpful for our small businesses is creating a climate where there's a lot of economic activity that they can access. And it's great that we're focusing on what is the city spending its money on in terms of diverse suppliers, but that's 1 or 2% out of a humongous economy. And so the goal for the future is to continue to grow that economy and to do so inclusively, which requires answering the question of why are we doing that, and then activating all the leaders to make sure that we're creating that climate. In city government, you have some levers to pull. You manage the tax and regulatory environment. You are investing in public safety and public education. These are the kinds of things that individual households and businesses are deciding, do I want to be here? Do I want to grow my business here? Do I want to raise a family here? And so those are the things that city government can control. And of course, the major institutions, they have their own levers. Penn is exemplary in understanding the economic opportunity represented by its spend, and in many different ways is making sure that it is being diverse in the suppliers that they use. So everybody's got a role to play once we decide this is the direction we want to go. And most of that is not going to be city government's own spend. It's going to be businesses of all sizes, institutions of all sizes, and that's going to be that's why I'm bullish. Is that we've got good people in leadership, going in the right direction, and so I'm excited about that.
Good. Okay. I want to do one more question before we go to Q&A. So I'll direct that to Chris. Chris, as you look forward and as you think about the spend with the law school, are there any things that you're putting in place to make sure that you're doing inclusive procurement, looking ahead? Are there any new things that you're putting in place for that?
No, I think we're going to try to continue doing what we've been doing.
Okay.
Expand on the partnership. Target those those high volume areas. Target the departments and target faculty, students, and staff. We're also going to be looking to you more because you mentioned we're going to be getting information in June. It would be great, and I'm not proposing that you do anything. It would be great if the law school and all Penn schools had real-time data, information about successes, about programs, about vendors in other schools where we're having real success. Information that we can act on, well, I say real-time data. I don't expect that we'd know it in real time, but not once a year, but multiple times a year to kind of keep our feet to the fire. Okay. One of the things that we've had to do is look internally about who our vendors are and use our information, use our data to really go out and engage with our departments. So the information that you provide is incredible. It's much more comprehensive, and those are the kind of things we'd be looking
In the real-time data, we had our new data scientist start yesterday. Mm-hmm. So the real-time data thing, we'll get working on. We should have that by Monday. Catherine's probably here, so we'll get that done.
Well, I don't have any more suggestions. No more suggestions.
That's a challenge, but that's something that we're endeavoring to as well. So that's great. Yeah. All right, so if we could take a few minutes for audience questions. Heather's over here and Cody's over there. If we could raise the house lights too. If you do have a question and would like to raise your hand, please fire away. We have one here in the front.
And then one in the back.
Let's go raise. Thanks, Heather.
Hi, thank you. This is great. My question is, since starting in 2021, there was a big push where it was almost like a trend of people jumping on the supplier diversity bandwagon. Have you seen some of that? And Tiffanie, this question is for you, mainly. Have you seen that kind of receding, that trend?
Unfortunately, yes. No different than funding has receded across how they invest in companies. But there's been some great consistent companies that have been doing it even prior to 2020 that I've seen increase their programs, which has been great. Like even prior to the pledge that everyone put out, they were already doing and seeing that they were not investing in diverse companies. So they've continued, but the folks that kind of unfortunately put out pledges kind of decreased by the second or third year of the last few years. So I'm hoping to what he mentioned about pressure and increasing that engagement, that the ones that are still doing it, the ones that have created plans that don't just give a timeline of 3 years from now, but 5, 10, 20 years from now, that will increase and go back to the momentum that we had at that time, that we're hoping to see continue, not just throughout your inception of a company. It shouldn't even be a close date to it. It should be, this is what we're going to do forever as we keep our doors open, type of thing.
Great. Other questions?
Thank you for coming today. I have really a two-part question. When many people are buying, it's not a mindful act of buying. They just go back to who they use, et cetera. So my question to you is, from awareness and relationship, what should the small businesses be doing to raise awareness and relationship when so much of what we're doing now is moving to remote? And then the second part of it is, as we start to do analytics, as Mark is saying and Chris is saying, that we're looking at what we've been spending and how we're spending, AI is going to come into that. So what should small businesses be doing and keen on to ensure that when AI starts saying, hey, these are the vendors you go, is there certain critical things you think they should be thinking of and putting markers down so that AI shows them up on that list?
Go ahead.
So I like to focus my time with small businesses, what we do as a small business, as a startup ourselves, a 3-part relationship with the buyer. So 3-part means, okay, become a vendor and supplier if you can, but then also become a partner with that business. So a partner, and some people like to lump it together, supplier and partner, but you can also separate it where you're creating content with them, you're speaking on the panel with them, you're doing those different things, whether they invite you or you invite them, so you're staying top of mind. And then also, I like to, if you are able to become a customer of theirs, for example, as we work with organizations like Google, I was already using Google, right? And then Google became an investor, and then we became a vendor for Google. So like that 3-part relationship where I have multiple people I'm able to connect with and call upon to get to where I need to go within an organization. And then also, to what he said earlier about data, part of what we do is collect up to 90+ data points on all of the businesses in our database. So you're not just looking at transactional information, but you're looking at who's that team, their board, their customers, their relationships. Because if you're looking at a larger company, they're gonna have more money than a smaller company, but you can't just base that purchase off of that. They're gonna grow into large once they get that contract. So it's keeping up with if you have Google Business or social media, and I know depending on your business, some people are great and want to have social media or not, but it's making sure that when we're adding data, we're searching for data that we're putting about your company that's public, you have enough data that they can make a decision on you based upon that information. So as much as you can, whether it's you or someone from your team, making sure that you're keeping that updated information. So when we're pulling data, we know we have the latest and most accurate information on those companies. So if you can, have a 3-part relationship with that buyer, be a customer, a partner, and a vendor or supplier.
Just a quick thought on that. I don't know the answer to the AI question, by the way.
Oh, AI, I'll answer the AI in a second, but go ahead.
I don't know the answer to the AI question. Wrong person to ask about that. But what you've heard, I think, from every single Penn speaker has been the word community, and I'd add another one, it's product. So I think those are the basis on which we are developing the relationship with our vendors. There is a community, and there's a community that we're looking to move forward, and product, need. And so those are the 2 things I think about. So go ahead with the AI question.
Yeah,
I'm interested in the answer.
And then we'll wrap. I know we have other questions. We'll wrap on
Yes.
that and then get to, yeah, go ahead.
So on the AI side, so we utilize AI and utilizing it increasingly as well, and it's making sure that as buyers are thinking, like you mentioned, like understanding relationships, understanding why we're working with this company or why we shouldn't work with this company, it's us utilizing AI to be their mind or their assistant to say, hey, you haven't worked with this company in 5 years. You should work with them, right? So that's how we're thinking about AI. Or this company is also working with this other school, you should work with them as well. Like we're trying to use AI in that way when we're being their supply chain assistant to remind them that this company is diverse. You say you want to work with more diverse companies, the platform is going to recommend that for you so you can at least consider them. We can't make you buy from them, but at least considering them is our goal.
Lee, I'm sorry, did you want to insert something quickly on that point, or you're good?
Well, I'll just add, this is a question that is of deep relevance to Penn. Being in an urban place, being in the knowledge business, I think that when the internet went mainstream 20 years ago, there was this hue and cry that place was unimportant, you could be anywhere, and as it turns out, it's the opposite. Human beings want to be close to each other. And I think that that's always going to be the case. But I want to offer 2 very important caveats. One is people want to be together, and urban places are the best place for that to be, but only if you safeguard public safety, only if you safeguard public education, only if you have good public spaces. So that's why this kind of civic discussion is relevant to something as commercial as procurement. And then the other big if is that truly, if your service is commoditizable, it will become a commodity. And what I mean by that is that you will be replaced by something that can be done for free or pennies. And so there's this constant moving upstream that small businesses have to contend with. as they race against technology to use it rather than be competed against with it. And so that's a huge if that everyone is struggling with. Professional services firms, IT firms, commodities firms, all have to contend with that. So it's a very important question to ask.
With that, thank you, Lee. And with that, what we like to do is, if you do have additional questions, maybe we can stay for a bit after we conclude the forum. So let's do that. But now we'd like to move to another highlight of the program, which is introducing our supplier diversity, or awarding our supplier diversity impact award winner. So with that, I want to introduce the tireless Colleen Reardon, who also needs to be thanked for being just amazing with today's event. So Colleen, come on out. And then as we do that, thank you, Colleen. And I had this word yesterday, and then it really hit home. I want to introduce the omnipresent Glenn Bryan to join Colleen. I had that word all ready to go when I was watching the Phillies game last night, and all of a sudden I saw Glenn on the third baseline at Citi Field in New York. And I said, did I see you on TV? And his answer was yes, that was me. So you are really the omnipresent. So Glenn, please join us. And as they get started, I just want to, if we can offer our panelists a big round of applause. We really appreciate them being here today. Take care.